ways, we did.
Yeah, we did. We did.
Now, with that said, this is one of the reasons
Charizard?
why many
I mean,
other
come on.
creature collection games that come in never find anything other than niche relevance, because the Pokemon brand is so massive that it stifles anything else that comes close to it. Could you ever imagine any game?
It's like, yeah, it's like World of Warcraft, you know, for the longest time. It was like just the biggest MMO, and like every other MMO was like shit because WoW was out.
Ever beating Pokemon? No. The only thing that could beat Pokemon is Pokemon.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, Palworld doesn't really care, and it doesn't really matter whether or not the Japanese markets are talking about it or celebrities or
It's
whatever,
only one country.
It's so massive that it's on the tips of everyone's tongues around the world. It's so disruptive and abrasive that it doesn't matter how big Pokemon is, because it's impossible to ignore Palworld.
Yep.
Now, with that said, some of the people that aren't ignoring it tend to be also some of the most vocal, and they're also the ones that believe that Palworld won't last within a month. Dead by Daylight developer Nathan S. writes, Palworld crossing 2 million concurrent players moved it past CSGO to only trail PUBG in Steam's all-time concurrent rankings. However, it is already the clear record holder for how quickly I became sick of talking about a game. I don't think Palworld is very good. It's insanely buggy. The most dangerous enemies are the random holes on the map.
No.
Combat is boring and repetitive. The balancing is
I don't think that's true.
Awful. This becomes really apparent in the mid and end game when catch rates seem to decrease and your own weapon's damage dramatically outscales what your pals are capable of. The large open world...
Your own weapon's damage dramatically outscales what your pals are capable of. He needs to get some better pals. Because I'll tell you one thing, Mo, my Jet Dragon... my ferocious, divine, legendary Jet Dragon that's fully maxed out at the PAL statue can literally one-tap the mammoth in the opening area with one attack. And he's not even finished. He's not even done.
I think I'm gonna just make
is empty, littered with points of interest that aren't home to anything interesting.
Home to anything interesting.
The combination of two strong loops is powerful stuff. Monster taming's just one more catch, and crafting's just one more build, result in an addictive amount of just one more. And since I'm weak, I'll admit that I've played a great many hours and beaten all the towers. However, I won't be chasing all the legendaries, and I'll be doing my best to...
You mean you didn't beat the legendary Pokemon, but you beat all the I don't know, man. Like, how the fuck did you beat the bird, the Shadow Bird? You didn't have a single legendary? Like, I want to see that. He just used a gun? You can't just go in there and shoot him with a gun, can you?
Dude, I did not change it.
I mean, that's not even like... You can't just do that.
Resist new content when it arrives. Palworld is early access. The windfall its sales have generated should allow it to deliver on its roadmap. And I'm sure both the balancing and bugs will be addressed. Yes, it's missing something I don't think any amount of money can fix. There's no warmth here.
Yeah, this is always the kind of shit that people say, and then they release some AAA soulless garbage like the Suicide Squad that just sucks so much dick that people spend the next 10 years doing video essays about how many dicks did it actually suck. You know, there's like one guy's video essay, it says it's 197. Some guy also says, you know, it's like 37. Then somebody's like, oh, but yeah, but that's in a row, so it's different. Like, what are we talking about?
I think I am gonna like extend it.
Like, I feel like if you want to talk about something that's missing warmth, it's modern AAA games. It's modern Western games.
I'm sitting here wondering whether or not we're playing the same game. Especially when he starts talking about him outscaling his pals. Buddy, you're catching the wrong monsters or you don't know how to train.
Yeah, yeah, bro. Like, I want to watch him play the game. Like, anytime I see somebody criticize a game, especially if it's a develop, I want to see him play. Nope, I want to see the problem.
Oh, same level.
What is the point of bringing up how the game has bugs and issues only in the same breath to talk about how the game is in early access and many of those things are going to be fixed anyway because you realize that the game has made enough money to do so?
Yeah.
Then also to recognize the two biggest strengths of the game and catch one more and build one more,
right?
Only to take the moral high road in the end and talk about something as abstract as warmth. and how you're not going to play the game and you're going to avoid any future.
I don't know. I think that some of the Pokemon are really cute or pals. Like I like the
Lettuce or tomatoes.
I like the little penguin. I think he's nice. I think that Catrice is really nice.
Probably gonna change them out.
She's cute. Not like that, guys. Just settle the fuck down. Depresso. I think Depresso is probably the funniest one. T-Font? Yeah, T-Font's pretty good too.
what do you
Chillet.
mean?
I think Chillet is really nice too. And like usually it's just like these are the ones that like people will recognize these.
Yeah, you need the pressure.
If Palworld continues to be a big game, people will recognize these characters. But you're right that number one will probably be Depresso.
content or updates.
I don't know what
for
that says.
The game, and you don't want to talk about the game or anything like that. Yet here you are talking about it. All of this
Smash or Pass video incoming. We should do that. We should do a Smash or Pass tier list for Palworld. Somebody needs to make one for me, and then I'll do it on stream.
moral high roading that we've been seeing from
I'll do
developers
it.
across the industry
I don't
over
care.
the last few years speaks volumes about the state of things, especially the reasons as to why we're getting games like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. It's because they recognize and they know the things that we enjoy and we like, but they want us to do what they want.
That's right. He's totally fucking right about this, because like that's really what it comes down to. It's these developers that want you to like the game the way that they make the game. Like I think Blizzard is like fucking like you know, example number 1 through like 50 for this. Think about how many people quit playing WoW because Blizzard developers couldn't stop making a game in a way that like just dicked on players. It's like, yeah, no, you really want to do DoorDash. This is our vision. You've got to do it this way. Like, no, we fucking don't, idiot. No.
To sit up like.
I'm so sick of it.
You know?
Nathan continues by saying, at the risk of being saccharine, what makes Pokemon so special is the bond you form between your adorable little ball dwellers. And this
How old's
bond,
Nathan?
This is what I like though. I'm trying to.
He's probably like about 40. Maybe he's like 35 to 40, looks somewhere around there. Yeah, it's because you grew up with Pokemon, bro. I think that's the real reason.
Refining it.
My opinion.
Did you know when you left my
also
thing,
to
okay,
recognize
you
the
know
two biggest strengths of the game and catch it enough breath to talk about how the game is in early access, and many of those things are going to be fixed anyway because you realize that the game has made enough money to do so.
No, that's hella hood.
Then also to recognize
Make sure I'm caught up.
of it.
Sorry about that.
It's just,
Nathan continues by saying, at the risk of being saccharine, what makes Pokemon so special is the bond you form between your adorable little ball dwellers. And this bond is the source of something approaching ludonarrative harmony.
Oh, my shits were dead. It's
So-
'cause they ran out of food.
It's also because there's like an anime that personifies the character. Like, for example, like Pikachu has a whole personality because there's been 20 years
No,
of
fuck
content
that.
made of
What the hell?
Pikachu. The same with like Charmander and shit.
Oh,
The
you're
reason
right.
why people love those little characters is because there was an anime. It's like basically, it's like the Pokemon anime is just a commercial, right? And it was a damn good one.
Strongest trainers are those who have the greatest connection with their Pokemon. The fundamental tenet of the franchise is that there's power in empathy. Nothing hammers this idea home better.
Oh, fuck. Here we go. Another gamer or developer that's trying to make a fucking, a social statement. Holy fuck. Another social statement. God, can you please stop it? Can you please fucking quit it? The power of friendship. Oh, you're so... It's just like there's nothing unique or special about this take.
In the first episode of the animated series, one of the greatest episodes of anything ever.
Yeah,
when
it was so
Ash
good.
was willing to sacrifice himself to save Pikachu. As Cass Marshall wrote in a great piece for Polygon, the problem is that I don't particularly care for any of my pals. I've caught hundreds of pals. I won't remember a single one. These critters are just disposable resources and labor. And aesthetics aside, they remind me more of slaves in Conan Exiles than any Pokemon. I'm hardly the...
I hate to say it, but if I look at a lot of the new Pokemon...
But the phrase was...
What the fuck is that? Like, they basically...
During lunch.
They
Okay,
ran out of animals,
Oh, I understand.
so they just... Oh, what's this? Is this a Pokemon? What, like, this looks like a guy that's gonna like. This guy. This looks like a guy that gets arrested for public indecency.
That right there doesn't make sense.
Because
to
it
me.
was
So,
Is this actually a Pokemon?
so what about this?
I don't even know.
You
That's
like
a cute one. I'll have to admit, I think that one's cute. What I'm saying is that I think a lot of the new Pokemon don't have the same style or the same type of, and maybe this is me because like I didn't grow up with that generation, so like I don't have that connection to it. But like I see them and I just think they look boring.
First to make this point, but the greatest takeaway from Palworld is the missed opportunity for Game Freak, who have been taking
That's
a
true.
devoted player base for granted for far too long.
True.
Hopefully this serves as a wake-up call. The bigger winner here beyond Pocket Pair? Whomever at Microsoft Xbox Publishing Studios
True.
signed that Game Pass deal.
True.
Now, this returns to something that I've talked about in past videos, where I believe that there are some studios that really don't understand their audiences. And in this instance specifically, when we're looking at the writer from Polygon as well as Nathan, they are reading far too much into the connection between players and their digital creatures. While I
As
realize
always, developers like to intellectualize and try to.
Past raises concerns of the first time.
This is like this is the issue I think a lot of devs have now. Is that they try to make a statement with their fucking game. Stop trying to make a statement. People are gonna forget what you said the moment the game is over. Stop trying to put yourself out there as if you understand. Like, it's just fucking. It's just. It's just. It's so narcissistic. It's like, oh, everybody has to hear about like my vision of how the world should be. Holy fuck, man! It's so exhausting. Death Stranding. Well, no, I have no problem with people that want to do it, and it's also, it's not that it's bad. It's that the people that criticize it are never. It's, you don't see Kojima criticizing Palworld. It's always these people that make mediocre games generally that are doing it.
You want to see everybody
Games that nobody gives a shit about the narrative in this game. Who cares? Or it's boring and one-dimensional. The actual people that are making the good games probably play this. They recognize, oh, this is some like bullshit Pokemon knockoff where you can shoot them with guns. Oh, cool. And that's it. They get it.
This is anecdotal. When I was growing up, I loved Pokemon. I wanted to be just like Ash Ketchum with my Pokemon best friend, striving to be the best there ever was. However, I did not have that same connection with the creatures that I caught in the game. In fact, I would assume most players don't. How many players are out there with Bill's PCs filled to the brim with monsters that they don't care or have any connection with at all, and instead are running around with a team of the strongest monsters possible because that's the kind of gameplay that Pokemon games promote? If anything, because of the way that we interact with pals in Palworld, use them for tasks at our base, use them for travel.
Yeah, I think that one issue in Palworld, this is like kind of a minor thing, is that I think you should have some form of way of upgrading the skills of the smaller pals, because I actually like the idea of having a lot of little small pals running around as slaves rather than having big ones, because it kind of ruins the power dynamic whenever you're having like a big dragon do it for you. But if you have like you can upgrade it by one level. Yeah, I mean like all the way though.
And use them for battle. Palworld
That's what I mean.
may actually be a little bit more effective in creating an attachment with the players.
Yeah.
Heck, I have Blaze Howl Noct running around my base, heating things up, even though I know I have better monsters to kindle.
He's cool.
Because I like the monster, I like the way that he looks, and I'm convinced that he's a better heater or kindler because of how awesome he is. I'm sure that there.
Well, yeah, I've got that red fucking bullshit Gyarados thing. All he does is get stuck on the roof and die.
Same shit output. And they need help loading inside.
I turn around, I come back. Oh, I'm dead again. How'd you get up there? I don't know.
You also assist with these runners.
Players that are just like that, riding around or using
So
certain
fucking
monsters just
stupid.
because they like the way they look, or because they just have kept that monster throughout the entire time that they've been playing. Pokemon games force the exact opposite on us. You need to use the most effective units in every situation, otherwise you're not an effective player.
You're not a
when we look back
Pokemon
to
master.
Nathan's initial summation of the game, and he talks about how he thinks the open world is empty, the gameplay is boring and
Oh,
repetitive,
God.
and how balancing is terrible. Well, we could say the exact same thing about the Pokemon series right now as well. But regardless, they believe that the most value is in this warmth they speak of, in the connection between us and our pals, even though he recognized the area where the game was the strongest, which is in its addictive gameplay loops, which tells me that their priorities are not...
And it is also funny to me, I wonder if he played Palworld more than he played the recent Pokemon game. Because if he said that he beat all the different towers, I don't know if he beat the last one. Like, you didn't even get any of the legendaries. Like, what do you mean, right? Because, like, doesn't that really say a lot? So, like, did you really play the other one? Because that's it. That's really what says it more than anything else.
Same as the players, because we can see the current player numbers on Palworld. The game's doing absolutely
Maxwell's
fantastic.
a little too long
Crushed
for
it
that
in
shit.
sales. And
Yeah.
why is that? Well, it's because it's a game that has its priorities in the right place. It's because it's gameplay first rather than anything else. And while I do think that some of the things that they talk about when they're talking about creativity and originality do matter, it doesn't matter as much in the face of just making sure that the game is actually fun to play and functional. Largely, I think.
Well, look at Only Up and fucking Dark and Darker. That shit's just store assets, but people played it and liked it a lot because it was a good game. Like, as I said, bro, these devs are lost. They're actually lost. They're like, I feel like, you know who the mining canary for this this developer narcissism issue is? You know who it is. Everybody knows who it is. When I say it, you're going to be like, yep, Neil Druckmann. That's it. That was the guy. That is the guy that so many of these fucking devs want to be. They want to be known as a fucking, like, you know, it's not enough for them to be able to be this great game developer that makes great games. People have to, like, perceive you as having some kind of fucking, you know, like, next level vision for the future. It's so fucking annoying.
One of the best early access releases I've ever seen. You know, I've seen a lot of criticisms around this game, specifically for creativity and originality, and it always loops back to that, especially with a lot of developers and also a lot of the game's journalists that want to criticize the game in every way they possibly can. And they believe that that's largely the reason why the game is not going to continue to succeed in the future. They think it's going to fail as a result of that lack of creativity and originality. Me, personally, I'm looking at the game, seeing that...
I mean, Call of Duty's been going on for how long? That makes great games.
They're following very specific archetypes. They're blending those archetypes very well together, and they're also laying themselves a foundation and a path forward based off the successes of other games that is likely a guaranteed road to success. Palworld's popularity and growth has been out of control, with server costs now costing over $500,000 a month. The CEO cracking jokes that the company could go bankrupt just from server costs alone.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, ultimately, like any game, Palworld's popularity
That's one thing people always talking. You know, I talk about like expensive games, like the server costs and shit like this for games now is astronomical.
Keep pace. People are going to finish the game. They're going to get distracted by many of the big releases that are right around the corner. Can't wait for Dragon's Dogma 2, by the way. And while concurrent player numbers may fall, it's crucial to keep in mind.
It's a fucking single-player game that has like a limited amount of content. Like Valheim is an amazing, incredible game, but I bet there's not a lot of people playing it right now because people that wanted to play it already played through it, and so there's not as many people that are going to play it. It's like Starfield. Starfield sucks, but like, the player numbers don't matter. Like Elden Ring probably doesn't have as many players right now because people played Elden Ring. They're done. That's the way a game with finite content works.
You're better off.
Like, and this is the problem that gamers have, and this is why these games keep trying to push this live service shit. Because gamers are like, oh, but the game is, there's not as many people playing the game. It's dying. And then it's like, okay, we're gonna add in dailies to make people have to play the game. They're like, oh, I hate dailies. Now the game's dying because of dailies.
He's timing it. Pretty much torquing it.
A very early build of the game. Many of the game systems aren't even fully implemented yet. Tons of planned content for the game's full release still is in its planning phases. And the team at Pocket Pair will have their work cut out for them when it comes to bug fixes, as well as just fixing a lot of the pathing issues that the game faces right now. Now, I want to clarify something because I think it's going to give people a clearer picture of what the future of Palworld look like. This game is early access, and many players that are playing the game right now probably haven't played an early access game before, or at least a...
Oh, they have. It just probably wasn't marketed as an early access game. I've played tons of early access games.
Early access like Palworld.
Just because a game says it's not early access, that doesn't mean it's not early access.
Baldur's Gate 3 was released into early access 3 years before its full release.
I played
early
that.
access in Baldur's
day
Gate
it
3
came
was
out.
only part of the first act, and it grew more and more as
Yeah.
time went on until it was basically the first act complete. It was buggy. Characters, quests, equipment, systems, and more were completely missing from the game. 3 years later, we got the behemoth that is Baldur's Gate 3. Now, while Palworld may not necessarily have the same type of roadmap, I'm just trying to illustrate that this game is in its infancy. It's this big in its infancy.
Be a little more careful. That skin's valuable, and we won't always be watching.
Second pass complete. You head.
As a sandbox survival
At this
game,
point, you don't want to
creature
touch the head bolts
collector,
anymore.
the game doesn't
Leave
really
them as
need a
is.
whole lot of content
should
to
all be
give it legs.
perfectly tight.
It can
At
walk
this point,
on
let's do
its
the same
own.
thing to the
Because
passenger
really,
side
when it comes
head,
to
and
games
let me
like
show you
this,
that
we
trick
just
with the
need a
head bolt that I was
sandbox and the
mentioning.
tools to
It's
make
kind of
whatever our
the same
own
as taking
adventure
out,
is.
just
And
Yeah.
that's something that
Now
they
it's
are
time for the
obviously
passenger
leading
side.
into. That's the
Lay the
archetype that
head
they've
gasket down
designed when
here
it comes
on
to
the dowel
Palworld.
pins.
Because what they want to do
Properly
is
seated.
strengthen the
Everything's nice and
game
clean
at its
still, so
strongest
that's
point,
perfect.
which is
I know this
give
wiring harness
players
is kind of in
more
the way here, but
opportunities
there is
to
no
play
way
together
to
and do
actually
more
push
things
it out of
together.
my way, so
They're
when I
chasing
come in
the
with the head,
Arc
I'm just gonna
and
have to
Rust
push it
Dragon,
out with the head.
rather than
That's
the
My
true.
only
That's
option.
smart.
Oh,
I
and
think
on
that
the
would
head
be a
bolt,
lot of
I
fun.
put this wire tie
If
here
they
so
ever
that it
add a
doesn't
raid
drop
boss,
down
I'm going to
into
do
the
it.
head past this,
live
and it
service
won't hit the
dragon, as many other
accumulator, but it
companies would
also
like to
won't
play at.
make contact
But
with
that
the
said,
block,
that's
so
the
that
smartest
the head
path
can
for them
actually
to pick
slide
because
on
those
there.
games
You'll
remain
see
relevant.
what I mean.
Why?
Well, I
Because
mean, you
they're
did the
played
job,
together
so,
by
you know,
people
you already know.
on bigger and
Just
bigger
as a
Yeah.
servers.
reminder,
That's been one of the
that
main
head bolt
focuses
goes
that
in the
Bro, I
second
had like
to
one of my
last
friends,
bottom
bro, he's been
hole
texting me like every day to play Rust with him. Like I need to fucking do it, bro. Like, cause Rust is so good. It is such a good game, man. I would love to go back and play that game again.
Okay.
has really been trying to
Put in
lean
some of
into.
these head
You don't
bolts
want to
here.
play Arc. If you want to play Arc, just put your dick in a toaster. It's the same
This
thing.
wiring harness over this way.
Play. They want to make servers
Give me a
even
little
bigger
bit
than
more
just
space
32
here.
players.
I'm gonna put
Who
in the
knows
rest
how
of
big
these
they
head
actually
bolts.
want to make
And
them.
also, don't turn the toaster
Obviously,
on.
just like on the other side, thread them on by hand.
It's not like it's gonna hurt you. It's just disappointing
Properly.
and uncomfortable.
But it's going to take a lot of money to do so, but it's going to help once these concurrent player numbers start to dip down a little bit because server costs will be a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they'll be able to then invest that money that they've already been spending on the current servers on servers that can allow larger and larger populations. So them choosing
That wire
to
tie.
lay out their roadmap, and if you guys
tricky
have looked
head
at
bolt.
it, most of the things that are
Slap
on
that
there
one in.
are
30
specifically
foot-pounds?
for
Here we go.
multiplayer.
Yeah,
And
100%.
there's a plan behind that. Multiplayer is the reason why I think Palworld might have the highest ceiling of any multiplayer survival game that we've ever seen. Games like Ark
I'm
and
gonna be
Rust
really curious to see how the game actually plays in multiplayer, and like what the multiplayer experience is really gonna be like.
allow players to create their own story.
Let's do one more
like
pass
you've
at 30.
likely seen videos of it. I was recently
Yeah.
watching a 3-hour video with over 5 million views about how 3,000 players simulated Earth civilization in Rust. The reason why things like this are possible in games like this is because they give players the tools to do whatever they want with that world. However, games like Rust and Ark aren't always appealing to everyone. You know what is appealing to everyone?
Now,
Palworld.
let's go for 90
Well, the
degrees.
reason why it's not appealing, I think, is primarily because it's a PvP game that has full loot. I mean, a game like that is never going to be popular in the same way that something like Palworld can be popular. That's always going to be for a niche of people. And in the opposite way, I think that Rust videos are way more interesting to watch than Palworld ones. It's just the way it is.
Those figures proved it. The CEO of Palworld has already come out saying that they're looking for more ways to be able to get more
And
players
second
into
pass
the
at 90
game.
now.
They want to increase their server
A
size.
yellow
past
ball
32
for a
players.
13.
Once this game has migration services, that means that we're going to have the ability to build our own team and character on a solo world or on a group world head over to a friend's realm or take our team to a larger server for trading, fighting, and playing with other players. The foundation that Palworld...
What they need to have is like, you know, like in Fast and the Furious where they race for pink sheets? They need to have like PAL battles where like if you win, you take the other dude's fucking PAL.
Okay, that's all.
Pink slips? Yeah, pink slips. Yeah, like they need to have that.
So it's time to put the
Where
timing
like you
chain
both
on.
sign
So
up
when you
for
get
it
your
and
new
then people
timing
can
chain,
watch.
You'll notice that
That would
it
be
has
fucking
2 links at the
crazy.
top that are colored.
Yeah, like PAL
These are gold.
slips.
I've seen them blue. They can be any other
World
color,
has
but
already
they are a
set,
different
and
color
the
than
creativity
regular
of players
chain.
in
And then
other
there's
survival
one on the
games
other end
show us
that
exactly
is
what
also
we can
colored.
expect
So
for the
2 at
future
top,
of this
1 at the
game.
bottom. If you
Role-playing
stretch it out,
and
Maybe you could have
flat,
another
this
mode
bottom one
where like
sits
instead of
perpendicular to
taking the other
ones,
person's
and
PAL,
then these top
you
ones
just
sit
literally
parallel to each
fucking
other,
kill it.
just like this. And these two have to line up with the mark on the camshaft, and then the
You
bottom
literally
one needs to
just
line up with a dot
fucking kill
on
it.
the crank sprocket. I have another
that
sprocket
would be
here.
crazy.
I'm not installing it. This is from another timing chain kit.
You get a butcher
But
it.
the
It's like a
sprocket has
cinematic
this
of you
dot
butchering
here,
it.
and that is
And
what
then like the
chain
other
needs to
players
line
in the
up.
cinematic
And the reason I'm showing you now is because the dot is underneath. You can't see it from up
has
top. You'll need
blown
a mirror.
up over
So
the
this is what
years.
it needs to
And
look
given
like.
with
You
how
have this
flexible
dot
Oh,
Palworld
God.
already is, I mean, we already
One
saw
colored
somebody
link
mod
here. That's how you know you
Pokemon
installed the
into
chain properly
Palworld
on
within
the
a
crank.
week of its
It's
release.
flexible at the
The
inner and the
possibility
outer
for this
chain.
game
So this is
is
what you're
endless.
looking
Yeah,
for
sure.
on the
It's
bottom,
It's already
and
easy
on
to
the
see a
top,
future in which
the
I'm
chain
being
needs to
able to
line
play
up
the game on a mod
just
server
like
where there's 8 islands, and each one of those islands have 8 bosses, and if I beat
that.
them, I get
You have this
certifications
line
from each that allow me to be
lining
able to
up
take on
in the middle
4
of these
really
2
powerful
colored
enemies. We'll say they're in a
links.
league of
So
sorts
that's all
or
you
something
need to
like
know
that.
to
Wow.
properly time
And,
this engine. If you line up
kind of
these
elite.
2 marks,
I like
one
that.
chain,
Then I'm the
and
best
these
there
2
ever
marks on
was.
the other chain.
Now,
It is
the
time.
future of this game is
That's
really
it.
bright,
That's all
especially
you
when it
need
comes
to
to
know.
modding because of how
So,
flexible the Unreal
let's put
Engine
this
is to
on.
begin with.
Obviously,
But
I have to start
outside of
with
that,
the driver's side head because this one
I
sits
think
further
that
in.
knowing
and then
that
on
they're
top of that
leaning
goes the
so
passenger
hard
side.
into
So let's start
player-to-player
here. I'm gonna put on
interaction
the
tells
guide.
me that they
Clean
know
up all my
exactly what they
hardware
need to
on the
do to
driver's
make sure
side
that this
chain.
game
You
not
have
only
2
remains
different
relevant,
bolts
but
for
also
this lower
has the
guide.
best
The
path
long one
forward
goes
to a
into
brighter
this hole
future,
that
even
doesn't
more
have
sales, and even
the
more
flat
content.
ear
I can
coming out
easily
with
see
this one.
RP
This one
servers. I can
takes
see
the smaller
faction
bolt,
wars
and that is
between
because
people.
this
where
long
they're
It's going to
line
be
here
hard for them
actually
to
goes
make
through
that
your oil
happen.
pump
I
and
don't
then
know
bolts
if they
on.
can
So
do that or not.
goes
I
down
think that they
just
will
like
have to
this.
retool some things in the game in
Top
order to
mounting
make it
bolt.
work
The
differently.
shim for it
Because,
has a
like,
little bit of play to it, so you can
how
adjust
can you
it up
have
and down
server
depending on how
transfers?
you need it to line up. Now I'm going to take my ratchet
And not have it
and
be
slide
like
these up
totally
a hand,
disruptive.
and
I
then
think
we'll
that
go
they
ahead and
have
torque
to
them.
they have to make like different server rule sets, and you have to play on those rule sets. Because
These
then
bolts
people will
get
just go on a
torqued to
modded
89
server, give
inch-pounds,
themselves
which
everything, and then
converts
go
to
on the
about
actual server
7.5
and just
foot-pounds.
roll people.
If you don't have a torque
So, like,
wrench
how
that
do you
goes
handle
low,
that?
just make
Paying
them
over
nice and
different
snug with a
resources. They're
small
raiding
ratchet.
each other's bases. They're building fortresses in certain areas. They're trying to keep people out from being able to fight the tower bosses and things
Yeah.
like that. I can see it all.
I coated this guide in a
And I
slight
can't
coating
wait
of
for it.
oil, very thin layer.
Now,
so
while
that it doesn't run
multiplayer
dry
is
for the
key to
first
the
5,
game's
10 seconds,
longevity,
however long
keeping
it takes
players
for the
in the
chain to
game,
get fully
balancing
lubricated
that
since we
with
have
more
to
end-game
brain it
content,
chain. I
new
did the
islands,
same thing to
pals,
this
bosses,
Yeah,
and
see, that's what
technologies
matters.
will
Now,
help bring players back
To
to the
install
game
this one, you'll
and keep the
notice
game
that
fresh.
one
See, that's
has a
what
little
it is
hump
for
here.
me.
The other one does
Like
not.
it's
one
the
with
same
hump
as
is the
like with
driver's side
Valheim. Like I'll
chain.
come back and
So
play the
slide
Ashlands
this on
whenever
here,
it comes out,
just like
probably.
so.
You know, same as I went back and I
just
played
let
the
it float for
Mistlands.
now. Now I
And
wanna
like
put in
whenever
my
Palworld
tensioner,
adds in
and
new
because I
stuff,
have a new tensioner,
like,
it has
I'm
this
absolutely
little
gonna do
locking
it.
tab on
It's not even a
which will make
question.
it stay compressed until I'm ready to apply tension.
Who
and
are
pull the
already
tab.
playing
So
the
we can
game,
actually
find
install
ways to
it
entertain
now
themselves.
without
This is, yeah,
worrying
'cause I'm already bored.
that
Shut
it's
up.
going to
You're already
mess up the
bored.
timing or
Like,
make it
what, after how
difficult
many
to install
hours?
the chain or anything like that.
Like 150 hours? Oh,
compressed.
now I'm
So,
bored now.
Has a new gasket on here. Of course.
Get a
It's gonna seal up
fucking
nice.
job,
the surface
then.
is nice and clean. Take
You're
your
so
bolts
fucking bored.
out
Get
of
a
the
job.
tensioner, slide them in here.
And why we
Jesus.
start
Start 'em in.
servers.
And,
People who have
you'll
finished the
see,
game and need
actually,
a
I should
reason to
mention
come
this. You'll
back,
see that they're
that's what
marked.
new content
Kinda
is
hard to
for,
see on
and they
this one
will
'cause
come
the tab
back
is in the
for
way,
it.
but this one
The
says L
Dead by
for
Daylight
left.
developer
Alright,
had
so let's
mentioned
run
how
these down.
addictive the combination of
And then
survival
them.
game loops like Build One More and the Pokemon game loop of Catch One More can be. Well, this is effectively a fountain of youth for Palworld,
These two bolts get tightened
where
down to
survival
18
and building
foot-pounds.
mechanics can only generate so much interest. New monsters and lands to explore are proven by the Pokemon formula to keep players coming back over and
Now
over
take one
and
of your
Oh,
chains.
yeah.
It does not matter which
I'm not
one.
really sure
I'm
if
going
Pocket
to
Pair knew that they
position
were
it
combining
on
and
the
making this
sprocket down here
diabolical
on the
concoction
inner
of gaming alchemy
part of the
that's going
sprocket.
to
And now,
develop
before I
into
go
this
further,
Oh, my
incredibly
pals are
great
starving.
game,
That
or
was
whether
fast.
they
that it's properly
That was
positioned.
fun. And I'm
way.
starving.
it's
Look at
absolutely
that.
genius because it's something
Probably
that we'll
both.
be able to iterate on.
Okay, there we
One
go.
thing I've noticed is like with a
Perfectly
lot
lined
of
up with it
games,
now.
It is.
See, there's the dot.
How is it that all of the bugs in Super Smash Brothers
Kind of
Melee
hard to see on camera, but
pretty much have
it's lined up.
all
So now, don't
like
let go
come
of it,
together
because
to
it's
make the
going
game
to,
even more competitive and
skip.
interesting?
And because this side is the tensioner
Like, what are the fucking
side,
odds of that?
It's going to have slack on it.
The
and
tech,
on
yeah,
the
that's
bottom,
crazy.
we'll have to put
So
tension
yeah,
on it.
no, I think
at
the
the
truth
top
is
here,
that
like I said,
whenever
make sure
you
you
have
line
a
up
really good game
The sprocket.
and you're developing it in a good
links.
way, it's like there's the same with Mario 64. You're right, and
Probably
like
gonna
classic
get a couple
WoW.
teeth off.
It's
Yep.
like you have these
fine.
like serendipitous outcomes that
We're
are
actually
the
not too far off.
they are the aftermath of a great game.
Turn the cam.
And it's like on the opposite, you have games that are really bad,
Oh yeah.
and they have these like terrible bad things that like the developers never even thought of. Like having to run Torghast twice a week. Imagine that.
Oh yeah.
Just the same as the Pokemon franchise has done. As long as you're
Not
adding
good.
new areas to explore, new monsters, new things for us to challenge, things like that, well, those players are always going to be happy as long as you're
Yeah.
increasing the amount
There
of
it
things
is.
that we can build and the areas that we can build on. Well, now you're making those
Slide it on
survival
the
people
chain.
happy as well.
Exactly.
All you have to do is just keep adding on to those things until you can't anymore, and then you come out with a new game, and bam, bam, thank you, ma'am. Guess what?
Sure the
You're making
sprocket
4 millions or
in
4
all the
billions, I
way.
guess, in the case of
The guide
Palworld.
is
That's a lot of
sitting
money.
With
where
that
it
said,
needs to be.
it's incredible. It's
Just
something
a
they're going to
couple
be able to
back and
continue to
forth
work on for quite a long
movements to
time,
make sure
and
the
it's
chain
just
is
the
fully
gift
seated.
that keeps on giving, not
See,
only to
there we
them
go.
but to the
It's important
players
to
as
check it.
well. And as long as the quality stays high
looks like
and
we
they
have some
stick
slack
with
here,
the plans
so
that they've set
I want
forth,
to
the
check
game is just
the
going
teeth
to
on the bottom because
continue
there's
to
too
do
much tension
well.
here.
It will, and it will
slack
go
here.
down in
I don't like it.
popularity. Like Palworld is not going to
well,
have the
it
same
didn't.
level of
So what that
popularity that it
means
has now in
is
6
once
months,
tension is
probably,
being
unless they do
applied
some
here,
kind of crazy
it's
thing that
going
we
to
can't even
turn
predict right
this
now.
cam
The
counterclockwise,
truth is
which,
that like
looking at it
that's
right
the way
now,
that any game
it's
is,
supposed
and
to
that's
be at
not
12
meaning
o'clock
that a
position.
game is
It's kind
bad.
of like
It
towards
means
the,
that a game was
12:30.
great. We had a lot of fun playing it. It was fucking awesome.
That makes sense.
What's the
as to
problem with
why
that?
It has slack on the bottom
that?
because naturally
Now,
the
I
springs
realize that
wanna
a lot of
push it that
people in the
way,
industry
it
are
needs to
scratching
come
their
back.
heads. They're saying,
This,
how come you
and
coach
then
him but not
you
me?
can see we have
They're
tension
upset
here.
about it. I get
Slack
it
here. So
because it
that's
doesn't make
actually
a lot of
perfect.
sense to
I'm
them
not going
because
to touch
their
this anymore.
priorities have been in the wrong places
Out of there.
far too
And
long.
this
That's
chain is
exactly
on.
right. The
tensioner
developers,
is
Western
ready to
developers,
be
have priorities
engaged,
in the
but
wrong
we're
places.
first going to put the other side on.
You want to make
before
the
we
game
pull this.
feel warm?
Now
just gonna
let's
wait.
I just
install
glitched through a
this
wall.
upper
It's
guide.
levels away.
This is the one that's broken for us. Run it down and then torque the bolts to 89 inch-pounds.
You talk about warm.
639. That's not bad.
The boss has 2 mechanics.
I'm going to put the guide that goes on the tensioner, but I won't put this tensioner in
This
yet.
is the situation
I think
that
on
needs
the other
to be
side, I
addressed.
should have waited to put the tensioner in. I had a harder time putting the
Warm.
chain on
Mine is like
than
Play
I would have
games
if
are
I didn't
becoming
have the
less
tensioner.
and
So I'm
less
going to leave it like
attractive
this.
Oh, you played
Put the
Diablo
chain
4?
on,
Seeing the
then
trip-
put the
that-
tensioner in.
Hopefully that makes my language here. We're seeing that
chain on.
many indie
gonna
games,
start by
double A
guessing
games,
the
independent
position,
studios are the
and
ones
then
that are
I'll
starting
put
to
my
lead the
mirror.
charge.
Well, we have to keep in mind again now that we've had Skull and Bones come out. Now we have to go into the realm of quadruple A games, no longer just triple A games.
There it is,
Quadruple A
perfect.
games.
Lines up exactly
Here,
on the
many
dot.
of the games that were released
Yeah.
that ended up being Game of the Year
Saw the other
didn't
side.
come from
Okay, so
major
now
AAA
on this
studios. They didn't
top
come from
needs to
first-party
have
titles.
tension on it. The
Actually,
bottom is
most
the
of them
slack
were
side
just
because
single A, double A, and a few
tension
indie
does.
games as well.
So this has tension. Obviously, we're very
I
far
think
off
that
here. You can see
ultimately
several
what's going to end up
chain links.
happening, especially with games
Three
like
eighths
we've seen
ratchet
with
in there.
Baldur's Gate 3, and now we're also now
Hold
seeing this
chain.
with Palworld, there's going to be a bit of a
And this.
correction within the market or within the industry. At least I
One
hope
more
they're going to
tooth.
have some type of correction where they're going to
Oh,
realize.
there is. That's why a
That
bunch
is
of
it
people are
right
getting
there.
fired. It's because they're not good at their
yeah,
job.
but
They
it's
suck.
alright because you don't have to go.
Okay.
That's the truth. That's like that guy that
On.
narrative
I'm
guy
gonna
at Blizzard,
let
the
go.
Steve Denuser. They
Be
fucking
very
kicked him
careful
out
when you
because
do
he's
this.
trash.
You don't want it to jump
That's what
timing.
happens. You go to your job, you
Hold it
suck,
like
you
this.
get fired.
Don't
Lettuce is
push
the
the
best.
chain down. 'Cause
Should be
it'll
happy
slack
he's
off.
got- they let him
This
stay
will
there for
fly,
that
no
long.
timing, and Fly backwards.
If you
So
worked
now
in
last
any other
thing to
industry,
do,
he'd been
put
out on his ass in
tensioner
6
over
weeks.
here. I have
If
it
that.
ready with bolts.
Probably 6
Hold the
days.
chain up, hold the guide
wait
up.
till-
We don't
Everything is
necessarily
lubricated with
need
oil.
all these
Make sure the
massive
tensioner
budgets. We don't need
slides
these
underneath this
triple
guide
A
here,
polish all
just
the
like that.
time.
Perfect.
Sometimes you
Just
just
bolt
need to
started
give us a
in.
sandbox to play with our
on.
friends, and we'll be able to figure
well.
things out on our own. And
These
that's
out,
exactly
put
what a
the
game
18
like
foot-pounds,
Palworld is giving
and the
us.
chain
Yeah,
is
it has
on,
some
the
bumper
engine's
rails on
high.
the side,
Then
things
we
that
just
we're
pull the
already
pin,
used to, like
rotate it
collecting
several times to
Pokemon
make
or
sure all
Pals
is
or
well.
whatever you'd like to
I'm gonna
call
use
them.
my air
But
ratchet
also
to
at
drive
the
it into
same
the
time,
faster. I'm
well,
not Titan
gives
on
us this
with
world
this.
that we can craft and create our own adventure and do things as we will. Take challenges on as we want to take them or as we discover them. And that's really important because at the end of the day, like I said, it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I will fucking remember that 25-minute fight
Everything
with that
is
jet
lined
dragon.
up. I double checked all of my marks. This is lined up.
Bro,
this is
like,
lined
that
up,
was, like,
Frank is
my
lined up on
initiation
both
to become a
chains.
man in
It's
that
time
game.
to pull the tab
Because,
on
like, there was the time before I had him, and then after I had him.
They should come
And
right out.
after I had him, bro,
And now,
like, my
tension is applied to
entire
the chain.
perspective
Now, at
of
this
the
point,
game
optional,
changed.
But highly recommended.
Like,
Let's
yeah,
spin the
3
engine over
days
by
and 3
hand,
nights,
mix
I
the
fought
marks,
this
and fill
fucking
line up
dragon,
after several
and I killed him.
locations. As
Well,
you
I didn't
remember,
kill
I have
him,
my
but I
spark
got
guns
his
out,
ass.
So it'll be a
And
lot easier.
he had the best, it's a fucking ferocious on him too. I was like, oh my god, this is insane. I was so happy.
Big budget games that we're looking forward to.
Oh, absolutely remember that.
We just want to have
I heard
fun.
it's the best one.
Can't huff the
That's all
ball.
Palworld is.
Oh, yeah.
Just a fun game.
Imagine that.
I have more content planned on Palworld that I'm going to make. I have another video that kind of dives into exactly why a lot of us
Yeah,
really
mine
like
too.
the game,
I got the,
or more or less why it's made such large waves in the industry. So look forward to that. If you guys did enjoy this video, or you guys are just enjoying the content of the channel overall, think about supporting me on Patreon. I leave my Patreon.
I need to
down
play
below.
Enshrouded
Every
more.
bit helps. Outside of that, my friends, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, and most of all, I will see you in Palworld.
There it is.
Also,
Yeah.
catch me live.
I really think they need to do something to like make there more of a social experience playing Palworld. I would love that. Valheim did? Yeah. Well, I mean, like Valheim. The funny thing is, like, if I look at Valheim, like, so Palworld. How many hours did I put into Palworld? I have 219 hours. How many hours did I put into Valheim?
It's gonna
310
take a while for
hours.
the
I did the
timing
second
marks
playthrough.
to actually fully
Whenever the new
line
content
up
came out
again.
for stream.
But if we just
Like,
time it back to top
I
dead
feel
center,
like
we should know.
I really
whether
enjoy these games.
We have it properly timed.
I
or
did.
not.
Valheim was awesome. Yeah, you did AFK sleep though. No, I played
Bring that to
Valheim
the
more.
cam
Like,
at
absolutely,
11
I played
o'clock.
Valheim more.
This one's pretty much
100%.
at 12. The crank.
Been spoiled by both
This
Palworld and
in here,
Enshrouded. It's been a good
it's
year
not
so
gonna
far.
be at
Yeah,
12
I
o'clock.
mean, and if
I
you
did it
look
on the
right
bottom,
here,
which I
like,
can
let me
feel
see
right
how
here.
these games are
Should be at
doing,
6 o'clock.
right? I mean, you've got
Should be down
Palworld still
which it
at
is,
over
you can
half a
spin it as
million
many times
people.
as you want at this
Like,
point.
that is
It should be all
fucking
set.
crazy.
Here's our timing cover.
How is
Nice and
Enshrouded
clean.
doing?
As clean as it's going to get. This is staying.
Enshrouded.
These gaskets along
That's
the side
still pretty
have already
fucking
come
good,
off for
man.
me.
Like, I would
They
say,
peel
like,
off
it's
most
almost
of them.
hitting
They haven't come off.
100,000.
This one is stuck. And
That
I
is
have a new one.
decent. It's
Don't wanna
dying?
use
Well,
this
of course
one.
it's going
I
down.
strongly suggest putting on a new one.
Absolutely, it's
So
going
what I'm
down.
gonna do to get this
Because
thing off
people have
is
already
take a
played
pick,
it and
we can
they're
take a
burning out of the
screwdriver,
game.
whatever you have
That's the way it
to get
works.
this thing started.
Is a game comes
Get it
out,
started,
people
just
are
coming
excited
off
about
here.
it, they play it a
Peel it
lot,
off
and then
the
they
rest of the
lose
way.
interest after they
Make
do
sure
the
surface is
content,
clean, which
and
it
then
is.
they wait
There's
for
no
more content.
Debris in here.
That's
actually, so there's
normal.
nothing
That
for me
that's
to clean.
good.
If
It's
there
not
is,
bad
just take a
considering
screwdriver,
Palworld came out. Yeah,
again,
I think that if
just
if
scrape it all
Palworld
off.
didn't come
And you
out
can
at the
see
same
there's
time it
some
did,
gasket maker
that
left over
Enshrouded
here.
would probably be
This
like
is where the
50% more
block and head
popular.
meet. We'll have to
Yeah,
reapply
they
some
reached the end of the
when time
current
comes to
content. Yeah,
install
that's
this
totally
cover,
fucking
but
fine.
for now,
Grand Blue
I just
Reeling.
wanna get this off of
Ooh.
here so that the new
Yeah,
gasket
this-
maker
that's
can have a
close.
clean surface to
Oh
seal
my
up
God.
against. And of course, you want to do the same everywhere
Here?
where there is.
I'm really
gasket.
surprised to see this
So
game
to
still
this
doing
surface
so
here, you
well.
can see there's more
That is
gasket maker
crazy.
here. And this is for when
Holy
valve
fuck,
cover
man.
bolts on. So
Yeah, Relink is doing good. Well, let's look at Suicide
clean
Squad.
this off. And I'm just gonna go around and clean off the whole rest of this surface.
What do you use?
The reason I'm doing this now,
Man.
not
Oh,
before
yes.
I ran this through the parts washer, is
That's
because
really
this
something,
is
isn't
so
it?
full of gunk and debris.
Yeah, that's
I
really
needed it
something.
to be clean so I could see.
at that.
what
You
I'm
played it
doing.
offline? Yeah,
Do the
yeah,
same
I
thing on
did.
the bottom where this pulls
I
up
did
to
play
the
Grand
oil
Blue
pin.
offline a little bit.
This surface
What would
nice
you
and
say is the
clean
average
because we'll have to put some
lifespan
gasket
span of a
maker on the
game these
corners of
days?
this too.
The average lifespan of a game. I would say a good live service game will last for 8 months. A good single player game will last for 2 months. And that's like, so whenever I say last, I mean maintaining relevance in the eyes of the public where everybody's still talking about it and thinking about it.
You can even punch
Like,
it
that's what I really mean whenever I'm
Whatever
talking
you
about like
have to do to
maintaining
get it out here.
relevance.
As long as you don't
Last
damage
having
the surface
500k
where it
confirmed
mounts, it
player.
doesn't really matter how you remove
Yeah,
it.
no, I mean it depends, right? Hogwarts.
Well,
Well, I mean
obviously for me,
Hogwarts
that's
is a
not
dead
working.
game, right?
It's not even moving, so I'm going to take a punch.
Like
and just
if
punch it
I look
through
at this right
downward,
here,
and
how many
we'll
people are
figure
playing
out
at
these
10,000 people? I mean that's not as much as it was. But like,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, you know why it's a dead game, by the way? It's because people played it. Like people beat the game. Like it was the
damage the
top
surface.
selling game for the whole year, I think.
doing this. There it is.
It's
Nice
a
and,
single player
clean
game.
here.
Still
Except
more
at
than
the top has
Suicide
a
Squad.
lip
Wait,
of
is it really?
Debris and build up. So I'm going to take a
Oh
piece
my
of
God.
very fine sandpaper.
Hogwarts is
and
actually
Henry cloth
outperforming Suicide Squad. That's actually
clean
sad.
the ridge up so that when I install the
Holy
seal,
fuck, that's bad.
doesn't
What about Monster Hunter
cause
World?
any damage. Of course, I will use a clean rag.
Dude, this
Put
game,
cleaner on it and
this is
degrease
still
the
really, really
surface.
good,
Where'd
guys.
you
Like,
get
I'm
that?
gonna be
Oh, I
honest.
haven't actually.
Like, this is really, really
rag.
good.
I think I got
All
those.
the junk we
I
got
don't
off of
think
there.
I've seen it.
As it went up to this
Make
much,
sure that the surface is
76K?
nice
Yeah.
and clean.
This is nuts.
Go underneath as well.
Yeah, I think
We're ready to install the new crank seal. Now, when you install this seal, you want to press on the outer lip here where it has a metal sleeve going around.
I tried to
You don't want to press on the inside or on this lip here or even in here because it will damage the seal. And even when you do press on the outer lip, you don't just press on one side. Because you'll end up
use a.
like this, where
think
it's
I
all
have
deformed and damaged. You need a cup, preferably. I have this out of my ball joint press and I cleaned it all up, and it actually fits perfectly around this seal. It is the exact same diameter as the seal, which is what I'm looking for. And with this, I'm able to press this down and in perfectly flat and evenly around, and it will get a nice tight seal in there. With your seal nice and flat, go ahead and tap it in. Perfect. At this point, you want to feel around, make sure that it's perfectly even everywhere, which it is. For me, it has seated perfectly. Now, at this point, you want to be careful not to hit the seal or damage it in any way because it's new and it's ready to be installed, and you don't want to have to buy another one and do the job all over again. So at this point, let's put the gaskets on. This is not the right one. You'll know if you have the wrong one because it only fits one way. That must be the other side. Oh, there we go. I just found the right side. So it might take a couple tries to actually find the correct side, but once you do, it will literally fall into place. All you have to do is press it down to secure it, and just do this for all the other ones. Put on this one next. No sealant is required on this gasket here. Don't worry about putting anything on it. This gets installed dry, and put this one on.
Oh yeah, that sucks. I have to reset.
So at this point, the timing cover is ready to be installed. So let's do that. Now we have to put some gasket maker on a few different areas, 6 areas in total to be precise. 2 areas on each head. So right here where the head meets the block, just put a little dab of gasket maker on here so that the timing cover can seal up properly. You don't need a lot. This is plenty like this. Do the same to the other side, of course, and then do the same underneath where the head meets the block. Right over here. This one's a little harder to see. Try not to put too much on, just a little bit. And of course, do the same to the other side. Then we need to do something similar in the corner of the oil can where it meets the block. You can see there's already some. I'm just going to add a little more. Not the best way to do it. Ideally, you want to replace that gasket, but this should hold up for us. That's about all you need. Don't go overboard because, well, there's no need to. It's just going to spill into the timing area, so that's not great. That's not what you want. Make sure I level it out with my finger. One last thing before the cover goes on is this toner ring for the crank sensor. Go ahead and put this on. Obviously, we have to take the bolt out first. The little teeth should be facing you. You can see they have a direction, but if you're not sure, it says front on it, and that is the front of the engine. That's what that means. And it can only go in one way because it has this slot for the little key in there. And there you have it. That's all you need. Let's put the timing cover on, bring it down. Make sure no wires are getting pinched. Slide it over. It has 2 dowel pins that it'll line up with. Just go ahead and press it on. Let's put some bolts in. I'm going to start down here. Thread them all on by hand to make sure it lines up. I want to push the cover on with those center bolts. That's why I'm also starting these that go around the water pump. Also, I should have mentioned, but before you put this on, obviously, when you clean and change the gasket on the cover, also clean the surface of the engine so that everything can be nice and clean and seals up properly. So let's run these down and press the cover up against the engine block. Actually, I'm gonna start a few more bolts because might as well.
And the settings? You
I'm
could
gonna start all of these studs as well. Remember these all the way at the top had this ground connector on them. Obviously I'm gonna have to take this off, so I'm gonna do it now. That way we can access the head of the stud. This one also had it, I just took it off. And this one also had this extra nut.
Yeah, me
That
too.
was
That
for
was my, like, actual.
this AC line
But it
here.
wasn't really my first.
The only
like, I
bolts
just
that we're
did
missing
shit.
right now are the one
And I
that
got
goes
spear
through
bolts
the
and then
power
I
steering
left,
pump
yeah.
and then the 4 oil pan bolts that go up into the timing cover. So let's snug these
Still
up
there?
and then we'll move to those. I'm going very slow with my air gun. Now let's get those 2 large ones on the bottom. I just want to snug them for now. I will torque them after they're all snugged up. But this is going to pull the timing chain cover evenly onto the block. That's exactly what I want.
You need it. I don't know what level, so I'm just gonna max myself out. Just
That's snug. Let me re-snug these, and then I actually want to put the oil pan bolts in
Yeah, I already
so
know
that
the
those
oil pan.
holes are all lined up. Run these in as well. And these. So there is a sequence for torquing the timing cover here. You start on this bolt, then you go to this one over here, then this one, and this one, and this one. And these are the 13mm headed, narrower thread bolts. So you start with the smallest one, torque those to 18 foot-pounds.
Yeah, for real. I tried to buy them when I started the video.
Then you're supposed to torque those 2 22mm studs on the bottom to 35 foot-pounds. And then you go to 35 foot-pounds in this particular sequence. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we'll switch to an 18mm socket. And now if you wanted to double check them, go ahead, but they're most likely gonna all be perfectly fine. So now, let's put this bolt in, and then the 4 on the bottom through the oil pan. Goes in from the side here through the power steering pump. Alright, it's getting close here. It's bottomed out and nice and snug. Alright, let's put the lower oil pan bolts in. There are 4 of them, 13mm headed bolts.
You saw that?
Slide them in, thread them on by hand. You don't want these cross-threading, of course. And the torque for these is in a specific sequence also. 1, 2, so the
Usually I
first
try
one's
to
first,
dodge
and then 3, 4, which are the middle ones. And those you torque to 15 foot-pounds at first, and then an additional 60 degrees. Foot-pounds. And now 60 degrees.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know what's material.
On this lower stud here on the timing cover, let's put on
Dude, you
a
can't even
bracket
use the
for this
Giga
line.
Spear, Jason.
This is the transmission line.
Dude,
Slide that on all the way. And, we'll have to obviously connect the crank sensor.
can't
After
use
that,
the Giga
don't
Spear
forget
on
about
the
it.
way.
Let's put this nut on. This was a 15mm nut. Go ahead and snug it up. Plug in the crank position sensor. You have to push it up hard
Makes
so it
you
clicks,
stay longer alive.
just like that. Give it a quick tug to ensure. 'Cause if this is not plugged in, or it's not making a good connection, your truck won't start. I have cleaned and lubricated the back side of the harmonic balancer
everything
where
really
it
quick
bolts
and then
on
fucking
to
shit
the crankshaft, or not bolts on, but slides on. As you can see, I cleaned this area here. I lubricated it with a thin coat of engine oil so that the seal can slide easily over it as I press it on. I also did that on the inside here so it doesn't get hung up on the crank. It goes on nice and smoothly. Use engine oil, not anything else. Now take it, line it up with the keyway on the crank. If you don't line it up, it's not going to slide on. So give it a couple twists until you know that it's lined up, and there we go. At this point, it should slide on. Now you're going to put your installer tool on here, tighten it up, and we're going to go ahead and drive this harmonic balancer all the way in. Okay, that's bottomed out. Let's release pressure from here. Remove the tool. Remove the rest of the tool.
You must have good ass pals.
Go ahead and put a little bit of gasket maker on the washer of the bolt, of the crank bolt, and then a little bit in between the washer and the head of the bolt, just enough to create a nice tight seal. Stick the bolt in, and then there is a torque spec, but that torque spec is meant for a brand new bolt. I'm going to give you that, but if you're reusing your original bolt, just do your best and make it nice and tight. Kind of like that. So the full torque spec for a brand new bolt is to tighten it to 66 foot-pounds, loosen the bolt completely, don't take it out, just loosen it, then tighten it to 37 foot-pounds, then an additional 90 degrees. Again, this is if you're using a brand new bolt. Now to install the power steering pump pulley, you'll need a power steering pump pulley installer. Looks like this. It's got one of these threaded rods. To thread it in a little bit more, I'm just going to use the help of my air ratchet. Hold the shaft over here, and just make sure it's bottomed out all the way. Don't have to go crazy tight on it. Slide the pulley over, put the tool back together, and I'm going to hold the stud and tighten up this nut, which has a bearing in it, and it'll help rotate. And this, as you tighten it, will push the pulley back onto the pump. Be careful how far you push it though, because if you push it too far, you're going to have to pull it back out with the removal tool. We'll just take it slow and check every once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Oh! Yo, that was not in the lead. Yo, I was in 60%. It's okay, I only got one. But I think it's like a...
For real? Because he's not actually like...
But the,
So once you get it close, let's remove the tool, and then we'll see how far this actually has gone in, if it needs to go more, or if it's too far. And there you have it. The pulley is flush with the end of the shaft that's coming out of the pump. That's perfect. If when you put your belt on, you notice that it's squealing and it wasn't before, it's probably because this pulley isn't lined up perfectly. So just try to figure out if it's too far out or too far in and just adjust accordingly. The pump does have a little bit of play in the shaft here, and that usually helps with lining itself up. But for some reason, if you put it on too far or not enough, well, like I said, it'll squeal and then you'll have to adjust it. Now with the valve covers cleaned up, let's install some new gaskets so we can put the valve covers on. I'm only going to show you one side. I actually already did the other side, and the gaskets, which I recommend, you'll see that on one side, the groove has a kind of like a split down the middle. That is the side that faces the head. The side that does not have a groove, it just has one pointy area. It goes on the valve cover. And they can only go on one way, as in you can only put the left gasket on the left valve cover and the right one on the right one. And the other sign to look for when you install them to line them up properly is these two areas. These are to be lined up with the head and the timing cover. So basically here and here. Once you have all those reference points, it's easy for it to fall right into place. And then I'll show you how to put the bolts in, because if yours have fallen out, which most likely they will, If you take the gasket off, it's not difficult, but it is an annoying process to put the bolts back in. And before we proceed, I have this very poorly drawn diagram that shows where the studded bolts go and where the non-studded bolts go. So this is going to be the passenger side, which is this one here that I've already assembled. You can see has a studded bolt here, so on the front side of the engine, then one right next to the oil filler neck, and then it skips one, and then it goes to 2 more studded bolts. Basically, we're going to replicate the same exact thing on the driver's side. It's a mirror image of each other. So stud, 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 skip, stud, stud. So all the bolts are going to be the same. I'm only going to show you how to put in one. Once you put this one in, this is going to be the front corner, so it's going to be a studded bolt. I'm going to grab a pick, keep applying pressure on the bolt upwards so it wants to go through the mounting hole, and then take the pick and kind of put the gasket underneath the bolt. It has a lip here, it has a lip right here that the gasket has to slide under, and only then will it be fully installed. There we go. Twist it around, and now your bolt will stay in place. Just go around and do the same to all the other ones. Now to install the valve covers, let's put a little bit of gasket maker right here where the timing cover meets the head on both ends, of course. Not a lot, just a dab. And with the surface still clean, take the valve cover and slide it right over.
Oh, and you could get the...
I'm going to try and start in a couple of these bolts so that it stays in place, stays secure, and then we'll thread them on and actually run them down. I'm going to come back and torque them, but for now I'm just going to snug them up, starting from the center, working my way out.
Yeah, okay, that's what I mean.
That's why I use
The torque for these is 89 inch-pounds in the same sequence, starting from the center, working your way out.
Oh, deadass. Do you be doing this? Yeah. I feel like they updated some. Why am I getting hungry so fast? Can I have a banner?
Now it's time to put the passenger side valve cover on, and I'm going to do the same thing. Put gasket maker on those areas where the timing cover meets the head. Here. That's probably a little too much. I'll wipe some off.
They just
and down here, can't see it, but trust me, I'm putting it on. Now the trick to this one is to come in at an angle and then bring it up and over this rear cam lobe over there, obviously underneath all this wiring. At the same time, make sure that the gasket doesn't pop off.
Those crevices are cool at the start.
Just like this. Twist it and it should fall right into place. Of course, I'm going to double check before I bolt it down tight to make sure that that gasket behind or in the back there is still properly secured. I don't want it pinching and leaking later down the line. Okay, I'm looking at it from underneath inside the wheel well. It looks great. Everything lines up as it should. So I'm going to start all of these bolts down here. That way they're threaded on properly. And I'll just grab my air ratchet, run them down, and of course we will torque them. Okay, I'm going to start in the center and work my way out. Okay, now let's torque them to 89 inch-pounds. I'm going to start in the center, work my way towards the outside. Alright, valve cover's tight. At this point it would be easiest to install the spark plugs now because the intake is still out of the way. I strongly suggest new spark plugs. But if yours are still good, you can just go ahead and reuse them. The torque for these is 13 foot-pounds. Do not lubricate the threads with anything. They go in dry. Perfect. It's time to reinstall the intake. When you do this, make sure you put new gaskets on. I did. So this is ready to go. The surface is clean. Let's bring the intake in and slide it down onto the head here. Make sure you don't pinch any wires. I'm gonna go back there and double check. Make sure your fuel lines are accessible and not jammed between the firewall and the intake. Let's make sure everything's lined up. It is. Let's put the bolts in. Don't forget to put this on and then drop the bolts through. Make sure that these line up. I'm going to start all of them by hand before I go any further. That way I make sure that the threads are good. So now let's put the rest of them back. Now I'm going to bottom out all the bolts starting from the center, working my way out. And the torque spec for this has 2 passes in that sequence, one at 18 inch-pounds and the other one at 18 foot-pounds. 18 inch-pounds is basically just bottomed out. So if I just bottom it out, there's the first pass. Okay, now let's torque them all. 18 foot-pounds. Intake is torqued down. Let's get the throttle body on. Bring in the throttle body and we'll install this. Okay. Make sure the gasket's still seated in place there. And then try to line up the bolts. I think this one, yep, that one lines up. Let's start this one in and finally one at the back. Pretty difficult to see all these, but just feel for them. I'm gonna go ahead and bottom these out and then we'll snug them up. Alright, so with the throttle body on, I have a slight situation here with the vacuum hoses because I actually bought a new PCV hose system assembly here. So it also came with this hose, which is the coolant hose that leads to this valve on the throttle body. And then from there it leads through this to the intake. Well, this is staying, but this rear hose has to go, as well as I think this one over here, which is to be replaced with this, which is on the new assembly. So basically you may not have to do this step, but I do. So I'm just going to quickly swap over some hoses, and once it's rerouted, because you probably don't have to do this, I'm not going to show you in detail, but I will show you exactly how it needs to be routed once it's all done. So here's what it's supposed to look like once it's done. Right out of the PCV from the valve cover, make sure that's pressed in all the way. So from down here, this main long tube, plastic tube, goes all the way to the back of the intake. It's got a large rubber 90-degree fitting on there. Make sure that's plugged in. It tees off of this into a smaller little tube, plastic tube that feeds the throttle body. This is your PCV. This assembly is a heated PCV with coolant, so It has two coolant hoses that go into here. You can see one comes off of the water pump tube off the back, comes into the PCV on the valve cover, goes back out into the throttle body over here, right where the vacuum hose goes in. Then it comes out through this hose, which will plug into the intake. And one of the only other hoses here is a coolant hose, this main heater core hose that also plugs into the intake. So let's get those in, but this is kind of what this is all supposed to look like. It's a mess, not easy to figure out, especially if you were in my situation where someone kind of rigged everything and hacked it together and I had to figure out what piece goes where, but this is what it's supposed to look like. So let's get this main heater core hose plugged in, get the clamp back on, and then get the smaller hose from the throttle body back on as well. This one just had a hose clamp. Go ahead and tighten that back up. Make sure it's pressed down all the way. Nice and snug. Now it's time to reconnect the fuel lines, and to do that, it's much easier than removing them. All you have to do is line them up and press them on until they click and snap into place. It's kind of hard to show you when I'm actually doing it because there's very limited space, but this is what it should look like when you're done. You're supposed to see the spring around it seat right into place, and if you don't see it, that means it has not snapped around the retaining ring on the fuel rail, and it will pop off eventually. So make sure that you can see that spring looking retainer around it. Double check it, even triple check it if you have to, and obviously we'll check for fuel leaks when we're done, but for now just make sure that the feed and the return lines are pressed onto the fuel rail tightly. Let's reconnect all of our fuel injectors, and then we'll drop the ignition coils in, bolt those up, and plug those in as well. When you plug in the fuel injectors, make sure it has a good connection. I'm going to blow out the holes that the spark plugs sit in. That way when I drop the ignition coils in, there's no debris that gets stuck in there, just in case any fell. I prefer to put all my ignition coils back in the same order that they came out in. It's not necessary, it's just what I prefer to do. And another tip is to put some silicone paste or dielectric grease on the end of the ignition coils. This will just help them to not only seal up better moisture-wise, but also to prevent them from getting stuck on the spark plugs when the next time comes that you have to pull them out. I'm just going to drop all of them in and then I'll bolt them up. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and plug them all in. These just have some screws that hold them on, so start them into the intake and just go ahead and snug them up. That's snug. Just do the same thing down the line, and of course we'll do the same thing to the other side once this side's done. So I did the same on this side. I plugged in all of the injectors, ignition coils, bolted them on. Everything is all set. Let's situate all these vacuum hoses wherever they have to go. So this hose goes onto the intake tube. We'll leave this aside for now. Same with this one over here. These two connectors will go on a little valve that goes here in a minute. We're going to ignore that. This goes on the top of the throttle body over there. There are two hoses at the back of the throttle body. One goes to this evap solenoid here, which connects onto the top of the two rear fittings. And then your brake booster line will connect onto the bottom of the two rear fittings. Press that on all the way, make sure that it's secure, otherwise you lose power brakes if that pops off. Then you have this line right over here, which is supposed to connect to your, it's a red vacuum hose. It connects to your fuel pressure regulator down here. And you also have this tan off-white vacuum hose, which connects to this evap control unit here, which is also where this line comes from, the vacuum hose that connects to the top of the rear of the throttle body. And while we're here, let's plug in the throttle body, or the throttle position sensor that is. That goes over here, just like that. On these studs here, I had these ground connectors, which plug into this harness over here. Plug that in, secure it, finish bolting up that nut. So I'm gonna just make sure this is all clean, put it on, and tighten up this nut. And of course we'll do the same to the other side. Now because I have my driver's side manifold out, I'm gonna put back the two bolts that hold that big bracket, which happens to hold the power steering pump reservoir. The bracket is slotted, so if I start the bolts in, I can slide the bracket over them sure this is nice and snug. And since we're here, let's put the oil dipstick tube back, bolt it up. Perfect. All right, let's get these manifolds on. What I'm going to do is, well, first of all, I cleaned up the surface a little bit. If yours is corroded and everything, you can just use some sandpaper on a sanding block or whatever you have to do to get this cleaned up. I'm going to put in a couple studs just so I can have this guide to putting the manifold on. I'll put on this one and that one. Next, I'm going to put on the gasket. And now the manifold comes with new hardware here at the bottom. Obviously, this is loose, so we're going to have to tighten it once it's all installed. There's no gasket necessary for this. This is basically a built-in gasket, and the rest of the pipe squishes on here, tightens up nice and tight, and seals up. You can always use some exhaust gasket maker and seal it up if for some reason your pipe does not seal up, but I'm just going to put it in like this. This is how it was designed. So slide this down. I'm actually going to take these bolts out because it'll be easier to put this on without them. Okay, we got this to line up. I'm going to put in more of these studs. Well, all of them, really. They all have to go in, and we'll snug them up and then put the nuts on. I always recommend new hardware when you're dealing with exhaust, just because from all the heat cycles, it gets brittle, and it's more likely to break in the future if it hasn't already. Now with all of these studs in, let's bottom all of them out. I put 2 nuts here so they can hold the manifold in place while I bottom out the rest of them. These 2 studs are already bottomed out. And you don't have to make these tight. Literally just go until it stops turning and then stop there. That means it has bottomed out. And we'll do the same top and bottom, and then I'll run you through the torque sequence and torque spec. Put on the rest of the mounting nuts. The torque for this is 18 foot-pounds for all these nuts here, and you start from this one over here, so you start at the back, move down, and then go to this one, move down, this one down, and so on both sides. So regardless of which manifold you're doing, it's the same torque spec and sequence. And then afterwards is when we're going to bolt it onto the pipe. But you want to make sure, since this pipe can move around, that the manifold is pressed tight up against the engine, seals up, and then we bolt it up here. So because I can't really get a torque wrench in here, because all the bottom ones are going to be at an angle, I'm just going to use my air gun and tighten them up. But the torque is 18 foot-pounds. If you can get a torque wrench in there somehow, go for it. But just so you know, the swivel defeats the purpose of the torque wrench because it's going to read wrong. So just keep that in mind. Gonna go back around and double check them all. Now we have to bolt up this flange, stick the bolts down from the bottom so that these top threads, the shorter threads, can start into the manifold, and then the bottom gets a nut that clamps everything together. I'm gonna go ahead and bottom these out. And that's snug also. Now let's get the 2 mounting nuts on. Now when you do this, go back and forth between the 2 so that the flange can seat itself evenly, otherwise it'll pull more to one side and then it won't seal up. The torque for these is 30 foot-pounds. Again, there's no way I can torque them because I'm actually at an angle here.